My name is Pauline Blanchette, and I've created this podcast, Speak Up, to help remove the stigma of mental health and to get young people speaking about mental health.
Please be advised, this podcast contains potentially upsetting discussions about mental health and suicide. If you're a young person seeking mental health support, please see our end of episode guidance, contact your GP for support, or call the Papyrus helpline for immediate help on 0800 068 4141. Thanks.
Recently, there has been more and more press about men and mental health, and I think it's been something amazing. We've had some amazing celebrities come out, like Professor Green, talking about his mental health issues, and it really is a step forward. This is probably a well-known fact now, but suicide is the biggest killer for men under 35. Men are 3 times more likely to be alcohol-dependent women, and they're more likely to take drugs. And 76% of suicides are men. I decided to speak to Peter Wilson about what anxiety means and what it means for a man to be anxious and what a man's pressure is today in this world, and maybe why it's more difficult for them to speak to people and to go and seek help.
Hi, my name is Jacob. I went to the Brent Centre for about 2 years. I'm 21 now, but I went between the ages of 17 to 19 after my experience with anxiety began around the ages of 16. I had 2 big panic attacks at 16 and then spent a year, more or less, suffering pretty intensely from anxiety, and then went to the Brent Centre for 2 years, and it helped me out quite a lot. Well, I remember very well when I started going because I had 2 very enormous panic attacks around the ages. I mean, I remember it because it was just before the Reading Festival, which we all went to, the MGCSEs. So I think I was 16 actually.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember the festival,
Not the panic attacks. No, I remember those. You might not remember those. And then it was after, so after I had that, I sort of realised something must be wrong with me because I wasn't feeling very good for a while.
Yeah.
I think it might have been a full year after that initial experience of just feeling pretty, what I would call just raw anxiety, in the sense that it wasn't so much worrying about specific things. I mean, there was that kind of stuff, and and I do get that kind of stuff, worrying about specific things. Things like, just things like, if someone calls, you just sort of imagine they might be saying that someone's dead, or just like things like that.
Yeah.
But it's not so much that, it's more, I call it like raw anxiety. It's like hot panic of just, although those panic attacks were the only ones I ever really had, full-on panic attacks, it was for about a year, the sense of always being on the edge of a panic attack for like the whole time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you go into, around the age of, I imagine 16, 17, maybe, I think probably around then, it was just a situation of, walking into every single room and planning, even though it never actually happened, I never had the panic attack, it was planning the exit every time you go in, thinking to yourself, what am I going to do if this happens? Just sort of, as you're talking to someone in your head, you've got this face like nothing's going on, but really in your head, it's just, oh, fuck, you know what I mean? Like, it's just sort of, this build up. I call it raw anxiety because it's not, like I said, it's not about it. I mean, I guess the fear, it's like fear of fear itself, but it's a guttural emotion of like this building up of pressure, coming up inside you, and you can feel it physically. So that's what I was going through for a while before I went to the GP, and they referenced me to the Brent Centre. It must have been a full year because I remember, I went to Reading, and then it was not quite a full year, but it was the start of the next summer because I remember I just had my first session.
Yeah.
How long does it take? How long does it take in between, like, because sometimes I hear like the process between seeing your GP, like getting that, and the actual thing.
Well, to be honest, I didn't go to the GP for a long time because I was pretty scared of what was happening to me. It was pretty, I didn't tell anybody for months. And I was didn't know what was going on, you know what I mean? And you sort of start thinking, especially to go, I think what's interesting is to go from, I'd always considered myself before then to be someone who's really strong of mind and was really good at like, you know, dealing with myself. And I always thought, you know, this kind of thing will never happen to me. Honestly, that's what I thought. I remember thinking like, this seems so stupid now, but at the time I remember thinking, like, even when it started happening, I was kind of like, don't worry about this, Jacob, like, you'll be okay. You know what I mean? Like, I thought I would be able to sort of, I was looking at it really scientifically almost. Like, that's what I'm saying, it's not about the actual fears, because it would be me walking around and being, oh, I'm feeling this thing coming up in my chest right now. Like, like, let's just like, I was trying to take a step back. It was very physical. Yeah. And then that's how it began. And then it sort of built up and it went into more of a general thing of, you know, it starts off just every now and then going, oh, fuck, this thing's coming up at me. And then it turns into, your whole life was like, my whole life was like that, you know what I mean? Yeah. So the journey from day one panic attack to going to the GP and saying, I don't know what's happened to me, but something's really wrong, I need help, that must have took, you know, it's difficult to remember because it was such a hazy time, but if I think about it, it must have been like 5-6 months, something like that. Yeah, it's a long time. After I went to the GP, I think it took maybe about another 6 weeks, 2 months, something like that, before I actually got seen by somebody. Yeah. I think I have to go back and check. Cause honestly, like my memories, it's a long time ago now as well. My memory of that time is quite hazy. But I remember when I first got that first session. I mean, it was like it couldn't come. It was so essential. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it was so just sort of like, you know. And I mean, it was so. I remember because I went to that first meeting, and the following week I went to a festival. Yeah. Download festival. Yeah. And I remember I was sitting in a tent and I was feeling unbelievably awful, and I was thinking, you know, I just remember just thinking I can't wait for that next session so I can let all the stuff get out. Yeah. Sorry, what were you saying?
I was going to say, do you feel like a lot of it has just been like anxiety's built up as well because you feel like it's all repressed, like it's almost been like your own little secret that you've kept?
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah, definitely. I think it's sort of like that building up is such a physical feeling, but it's just a release that you crave. I was craving, you know what I mean? Yeah. Such a release. I remember sometimes even thinking, because I never had, I don't even know the difference between an anxiety attack or a panic attack, but I feel like I know the difference. I mean, I don't know what the medical definition is, but what I would say is a panic attack is when it clicks over and you're no longer sort of, you're not really in the same plane as you were before. While to me, an anxiety attack is like, I've had loads of anxiety attacks, which always feel like they're going to click over into panic attacks, but they never do. But I remember almost feeling sometimes, I wish I would have a panic attack because it's that release. I mean, it doesn't make any sense really. But the logic is it was so unbearable to have this building up. You just want it to look. You want something to come out, you know what I mean? I remember thinking like I wish I could like burst into tears or something, or wishing I could something could click over. You just want, you know, something to it's like a yawn. You could never quite click the yawn, you know what I mean? Yeah. That's kind of what it feels like. So then I used the Brent Centre for 2 years. Yeah. And that was really, really important to me. Yeah. I mean, looking back at it, I remember when I first went, I was thinking, because, you know, at that time I was thinking so much like of quick fixes, and the education on mental health that I understood was so sort of, I remember thinking like, this is just something that will go, like this is something that I'll just get over and it'll be done and I can, you know, move on to the next thing in my life. You know, I'll go and I'll take one pill and that's it, I'll be done. I remember I got that first session, I was like, oh sick, now I'm in the sessions, knock this whole thing out in like 6 weeks. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's how I thought it worked. Yeah. So there was a certain frustration when, funnily enough, you know, 6 weeks I'm still, you know, keep dealing with stuff. So it wasn't like there was never really a moment of, which I think a lot of people, well I know I felt, there's never really this moment of instant relief that you yearn for so much. But it's when I look at how I was when I went into the Brent Centre and look at how I was when I left the Brent Centre, you know what I mean? It's like, it's, you know what I mean? I can just see in myself those two different people who came in and out. And while you might not feel it as it's happening so much, you know what I mean? You always feel like it's going to be one revelation. Oh, I just didn't think of that one thing. Oh, now it's all gone. I haven't got to worry about that anymore because, I just didn't think about that. That's not how it works, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's thousands of little things. You take back control.
And so, like, I think, because I remember talking to you at one point on, like, Facebook, and, like, you had just started talking a bit about your anxiety, and I felt like I was getting some of those same things. But how did you go about approaching, like, your friends about, like what you were going on in your life? Because I think we were all we were 18.
Yeah, there was so many of us in our friendship group were all coming out with it at the same sort of time.
Yeah. I think we went to the States, everyone was...
God, what a great time.
Everyone went to the States, I think, but everyone just started, like, slowly, like, speaking out a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I remember telling my mum really clever. I mean, I think I can't remember the first person I told or spoke to about. I probably spoke to you about it at some point. I can't remember the exact moment though. And probably when we were drunk, realistically. Yeah. That's when most of this kind of stuff happens. Especially. Is that good? Did you talk to you guys?
Rightly so.
She's out with your bloody toxic masculinity. But that, yeah, especially for boys, is always when. Did you talk about this when you were doing your bit as well?
No.
Oh, you didn't? Well, he's full of shit, this guy.
It's about being a man, and
yeah, this always happens when you're drunk. This is when I speak to. I mean, with very few exceptions, even today, really.
Yeah. The
only time you really talk to your friends about it is when you've had a few drinks. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Maybe you had a few drinks.
I've been drinking. No, I haven't drunk today. No.
Do you feel insecure about being?
I don't know. I think it's.
Saying I've got mental health issues.
I think about it a lot. I think it's well. There's one thing to do with that. You know what I mean? You don't want to seem like it's like, you know, it's weakness and all that sort of stuff. But I think a lot of it's to do with it's almost difficult. Like sincerity is quite difficult. I think. Do you know what I mean? To talk to about, you know, because you spend all the time joking around with your mates all the time.
Yeah.
Suddenly, you know, sitting there, oh mate, by the way, you know, I'm really, you know, it's a very serious conversation.
Definitely.
And men especially, I think, find it difficult. Especially, you know, men can be talk really seriously about things that aren't to do with them personally. But when you've got a real problem, I think it's that vulnerability and that sincerity that's difficult to really, you know, to even stomach. Like, to hear yourself talking about it, you just suddenly think, this isn't very, very fun thing to talk about, you know what I mean? Because basically everything you do is all about having fun all the time. And then when you suddenly go, can you come over, I want to talk to you about this or that, you just feel like, you know, we're not really having a good time. And you don't want to, it's, you know.
You don't want to, like, bring your friends down.
Yeah, you don't want to bring your friend, you don't want to, I don't know, it's like, yeah, it's about burdening people, it's about, you don't want to be like a buzzkill, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But I think that is, for me, more than anything, I mean, there's obviously layers to it, and I probably don't even understand my own emotions as well as that, you know what I mean? There's probably more to myself that I didn't really know about, and layers to everything. But to me, it feels not so much necessarily about weakness in and of itself, but it's about like sincerity and earnestness. It's just difficult because, you know, you don't want to be bringing everyone down, that sort of stuff. You know what I mean? And it's that vulnerability. Yeah. The conversations that happen are quite rare, and because they're often limited to when you're fucked up, basically. It means every time it comes out, it's like an outpouring. Do you know what I mean? So instead of being able to have frank, normal conversations, saying, you know, oh, I've been feeling X, Y, or Z recently. You know, like, oh, you know, I'm really nice about this. Don't know why I keep freaking out about this idea or that. You know what I mean? It's always because it's always, you know, so rare. Whenever it is, it's always, I've been feeling awful and I don't know what I'm going to do about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
As opposed to, if it was more open and discussed, it shouldn't be seen as this great big thing like, oh God, I feel feeling so terrible. You know, you'd be able to talk about it in a more, you know, because lots of people who suffer from mental health stuff, it's not just this, like I thought it would be for me, you know, just as one period. No, it's like, it's basically constant. It's basically, I mean, forever, not necessarily forever, but it's something you usually have to deal with for years at least.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it shouldn't be seen as this, you should talk about it like, you know, symptoms the same way you would talk about any other illness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And what do you think is one thing about anxiety, like the idea you had about anxiety before and realising you had anxiety was something that you didn't realise, like you were talking about
how it takes so much longer than you thought to get better.
Yeah.
Or some other things that you had not realised.
I still, you know, I wouldn't even necessarily describe what I have now as anxiety. I mean, it's anxiety themed, if that makes sense. Like, I just think, whenever I feel down these days, I just think of it not necessarily, I don't get that hot panic I used to get so much, so it's just sort of like feeling generally a bit rotten, you know what I mean? But in terms of feeling bad, I mean, exercise, I think, is unbelievably underrated. And I used to think all that bullshit as well. Like, I would think, like, don't be so stupid to think that this, I mean, it's not going to cure anybody, but it makes, to me, it made a huge difference. During my A-levels, I mean, it was unbelievable.
What kind of stuff did you do? Like, what
Just
were you
running. Just running all the time.
I remember you came up to me, you were like...
It is like antidepressant. I've never taken any antidepressants, and I've never want to, I mean, you know, who knows what will happen in the future, but I've always resisted the urge to do so, because I've always thought that I want to try and do as much as I can, just by eating well and exercising, because I do think that, I mean, it's patronising to say, you know, if someone's schizophrenic or if you're clinically depressed, I can't just go, you know, go for a run, eat some vegetables, and you're going to feel good, but it is true, I think, for a lot of people. I think, especially with a lot of people who are dealing with, sort of, I mean, you guys said before as well, like, you know, there's people who are dealing with way worse things than whatever, you know, we're dealing with, always. And I get, you know, when you're experiencing mental health issues, it's very, very easy to give in to those urges. And when I'm talking about this stuff, I'm not trying to say, like, I'm not for a minute saying that you're weak if you can't get out of bed.
Yeah.
But it's so important to, you know what I mean? Because I'll wake up sometimes and I'll think I really just want to sit here all day and not do anything, you know what I mean? But I always try and make myself get out and, you know, do stuff and, you know.
So I find an outlet, so like George said before, like music and like...
Yeah,
Not
exactly.
even like saying you have to be creative,
Stuff,
you know, just like things are like...
It's
you
true,
don't want to just be constantly distracting yourself.
I've been speaking to a lot of the people for this, and like a lot of them said like, oh, help them. You got to music, drama, like, you know, there's so many things, and it doesn't have to be something creative. It's just like keeping yourself.
It's just keeping yourself busy. It's keeping doing stuff like stimulating the stuff. And I think, you know, it's sort of when you know, I will have the urge to sit in my house all day and just, you know, all you do is watch the same YouTube videos over and over again. All that really, and that doesn't make me feel any happier, but I do it sometimes. All it does is it's distracting yourself from the way you're feeling in the most minor way you can possibly do it, and you're avoiding the real issue. I'm talking about to myself really right now. You're avoiding the real issue, and you're just trying to distract yourself moment to moment. It's almost like basically, you know, just passing the time for the sake of passing the time, you know what I mean? In terms of advice for the raw panic, there was a bit of a little bit of a eureka moment for me when I was, I read this article or something. It was about when you have that feeling of like panic coming up, is to not fight it. I think that's for that period before I went to Brent Centre. You're going around the whole time thinking, God, what's wrong with me? Something's wrong with me. I need to change what I think. I need to just get my mind. I need to like, there's something I'm not thinking right in the right way. Why am I thinking like this? Oh, if I just was to have this realization or that realization, I've got to change the way I think. And all that does is that fighting, that increases tension in your brain. And then your brain is so tired because it's working so hard because all these mad thoughts are in your head and you're fighting the thoughts and the thoughts are fighting against your fight. You know what I mean? And your brain is so tired, it makes it weaker, which makes it even more susceptible. Yeah. And the minute I heard, you know, don't fight. When you feel this sort of stuff, don't try and battle it. Just, it's like meditation almost. Just sit back and let it wash over you. And don't be afraid of, you know, because I was scared of having a panic attack for like a year, all the time. And in the moment I sort of stopped, I said, who cares about a panic attack? Just let it happen.
My name is Bew. I'm 27 years old. Living in London, South London, originally from the Caribbean. Been living in London for about 4 years. Studying at the moment, doing a BA at SOAS, doing linguistics. Because we're here today to talk about mental health.
Yes, so I guess I don't know much about your story or anything, but I guess if what your history is with mental health, if you could tell us a bit more about that.
Wow, yeah, it is an open-ended question. What is my story of mental health? Well, like I said, I grew up in the Caribbean, and then when I was about 9, I got a scholarship to a boarding school in Britain, and I went off at like 9 years old to a boarding school. Ended up being there till I was 18, so it was about 10 years after, and I guess around 14, 15, I don't want to say started, because started is never really the right word when it comes to mental health, because there's things brewing, isn't it? But started, I guess, experiencing anxiety and depression, which I still experience. I'm not saying that was like this teenage thing that happened, but at the time it was a real shock, and has sort of manifested in a lot of different ways over the years. So I mean, was sort of, for me it was always very much about controlling feelings, and I was like really terrified of the way that these feelings were manifesting, the fact that I was feeling these like fear, anxiety, inability to function, a lot of the time this idea of not being able to meet expectations. So in quite a classic way, I guess, like, would try and control other things. So like I am an alcoholic, an addict, was sober for quite a few years when I was in my early 20s, and I've been trying to get back on it recently. I was bulimic for a little while when I was a teenager. I was self-harming at certain points. Different things at different times.
Yeah.
Really.
But all to do with control.
I feel as if it was all to do with control, and it was all to do with like having a space to myself, I guess, in a certain way. I mean, like, for me, it's like all sort of oscillated around drink at this point, like, because it's like, it's a really like wild thing. And like, alcoholism for me is a kind of self-harm in a way, as is like drug addiction in a lot of ways. It's about like self-destruction, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's like very controlled, slow self-destruction.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, it is. I think it is about control, but it's about. I mean, I was sober for about 3 years, something like that, from about 23 to 26.
Right.
And sort of relapsed last year. And it hasn't. Not like it's the end of the world. I mean, there's this sort of like horror, terrible story about like addiction and alcohol, where, you know, you're at the end of the day. You sort of pick back up where you started, but. I remember at the time, like a month or two before, picking up a drink that first time, after so many years not doing it. And I was talking to someone who was also an alcoholic, and saying like, I know why it is that I drink. Like, I know why it is that I drink, because I'd just been through some stuff that had suddenly made all these feelings that I'd been so successful at making disappear through all these various different techniques and strategies.
Yeah.
And they just rose to the surface, and I was totally incapable of processing them. Like, utterly incapable. I would be on my way biking to work, cycling to work, and I would just like have to stop and like sit in a park and cry for like a half hour.
Oh my God.
Like, really bad.
Yeah.
Really, really bad. And for me, it's and also, everyone has their own story, right? So there's always like this sort of pop psychology you can do about what are the causes, what are the root things.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, it's very much about rejection, and about appearing cool, calm, and collected, and about appearing in control of myself. And relationships for me, friendships, are like a real struggle to like, I guess, rejection in whatever form, even if it's not a rejection, but not being wanted, seems very easy for me to cast on myself.
Yeah.
And that's, I think also for a lot of men who went to boarding schools, that is a big thing. Like, men who went to boarding schools cannot do relationships at all. They just don't understand, because you're not really taught it. All you're taught is this, camaraderie of, slightly homoerotic, you know, boys band together, school of hard knocks, but it's also like a really privileged area, so you don't really have any hard knocks apart from on a rugby pitch. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
You don't have financial hard knocks or like really serious. I mean, there are, of course, people go through serious things in their life, but yeah.
So you think that was a lot of the reason why, or when it sort of...
I think I carried a lot of resentment about it, yeah.
Yeah.
I carried a lot of resentment about being sent away. I didn't really want to be there, but I felt that I had to do it because I was in that situation of having like a full scholarship and had donors paying for my school essentially, so I felt that I had to meet those expectations and not fail.
Of course.
You know, passing exams became like the be all and the end all of being. And life sort of, when you think like that, when you're taught, not taught explicitly, but when you start to think that that's the way that your life operates, life itself kind of becomes an exam. And I think for me, like, in terms of, again, friendships and relationships, like I can often fall into that trap of thinking that other people are exams that need to be passed. You know, they're like, if you tick all the right boxes, people will love you. Yeah, no, I often think about that, and especially with everything that's in the news and like the way that feminism is making like a really mainstream comeback in a lot of ways, for better and for worse in a lot of ways, but that idea of patriarchy and that idea of male supremacy, there's this weird sense in which it's spoken about. I think the for worse in that is that it's often spoken about and it's represented in the media as being this thing that happens to women.
Yeah.
And physically, obviously in terms of abuse, often women are by far the ones who are the victims and the sufferers. But that's not the way that patriarchy works. Patriarchy is a two-ended sword. Like, in order to have men who are committing crimes and like abuses, you have to make men into something.
Exactly.
And it's it's like a swing and a roundabout thing. And I think that really that message needs to be told better to people. I mean, at that school, I really did not have a good time, and I really retreated into a fantasy world in a lot of ways. Okay. Like, I mean, for one thing, I'm bisexual, which like I didn't even know at the time, and that only sort of, well, did I? I don't know. I couldn't even begin to pass it, and it doesn't really matter whether at some point when you know. But I kept all these things secret. There's a lot of them I haven't even spoken to anyone about, especially bulimia stuff.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I was terrified of, it was that in telling people I would be seen to be showing off, if that makes any sense at all. Like, I had this idea that...
This happened in my school.
Really?
Yeah.
It was showing, like, the call for attention, cry for attention. Yeah. That idea of the cry for attention is so fucking stupid. Excuse my language. It's so stupid, because if someone's crying for attention, then they obviously need attention. Like, it's that simple.
Yeah,
definitely. And I mean, I've had friends that have suicide attempts, and it's like, oh, it's just a call for attention. It's like, well, no shit. Like, if someone's at that point where they need to commit suicide, then of course they're looking for attention. Of course they're not getting what they need.
Definitely.
And to pass it. But I mean, I say that, but on the other hand, I never really did talk to anyone about it, because I was so terrified that it was going to be seen as that.
Yeah.
So I would just, take myself to the toilet and throw up by myself and never talk to anyone about it. And because no one was looking out for it either, it's not looked out for in an all boys boarding school kind of thing.
Of course.
I did have I got sent to a counsellor at one point, and I did these sort of really stupid acts of, like, rather than speaking to someone, I did this thing once where I tried to scratch my face off. So rather than I was cutting, but would try scratch my face off, and sort of went downstairs, and the teacher found me. He's like, "What have you done to your face?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know," and couldn't even speak about it.
Yeah.
But that was the way. That was the only way that I could really think of saying I'm really struggling, I'm really in trouble. I don't know how to say it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So how did you? So you just end up doing it on your own at that age?
Yeah. And I think it's not that people didn't want to help.
Yeah.
If I had had the ability, if I had known how to, if I had been eloquent enough in my own head that I could get it into words and I could tell people I'm struggling without believing that that was somehow not cool or too much pressure on other people on my part, then people would have helped.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the fundamental thing that people who are struggling, especially young people who are struggling, get wrong. People are not going to throw you away because you're struggling.
Yeah.
At all. If you're struggling, ask for help and people will help. And that's like the best lesson I've ever learned in my entire life.
Yeah.
Like, you can ask people for help because you're struggling and they're like, you're my friend, or like, you're my student, or you're my child, and like, I'll help you. And I didn't understand that. I just couldn't really understand it. And the thing is, those kinds of feelings, in my experience, and I know I've spoken to a couple other people about this, when you bottle up feelings, when you refuse to expel things, not expel, but when you refuse to express things, they mutate. Like, feelings mutate. If you bottle anger, and I had a lot of anger that I never expressed. I didn't know how to get angry for the first 25 years of my life.
Yeah.
Like, if you bottle that up, it will become depression. It will become anxiety. And if you bottle up sadness, it will become resentment. These things like mutate, and you find ways of expelling them in different ways. Sounds sort of esoteric, but it's definitely true in my experience.
I have a lot of friends, male friends, when I spoke to them and interviewed them for this.
Yeah.
A lot of them came out and said they suffered from anxiety, and this seemed to be almost a trend amongst my male friends. And a lot of them said they found it hard to speak about how they felt, and a lot of them even like turned to alcohol, maybe to be able to speak about how they felt.
Yeah.
But is anxiety something particularly common in men more than women, or is it something? Yeah, it just seemed to be a trend.
Yes. Well, let me just sort of sing a song about anxiety, right? Anxiety is not a pathological condition, right? Mm-hmm. It's a natural human response to dealing with the pressures of life. And I do think there's a tendency to sort of pathologise everything now. Yeah. He has anxiety, therefore he must go and see a psychiatrist. It's a mental illness. Anxiety is an ordinary, natural... We're all anxious. You're anxious right now, I'm anxious right now, we're all anxious. It's a human state of mind, okay? Now, there's no reason on God's earth why men should be exempt from experiencing anxiety. They do. Mm-hmm. And I've talked already about the two main things that you have to try and do in adolescence. You've got to come to terms with this extra body, which is doing extraordinary things. You know, and we've all been through it, and everybody thinks, what's the big deal? It is a big deal. You know, suddenly your body is growing, and its shape is changing, you're producing emissions, or you're menstruating. I mean, it's the full works that's going on. Yeah. What the hell is going on? You know, and that has an impact on the mind, and that creates, in of itself, anxiety. What kind of a sexual person am I? Can I be potent or not? And then I think we can wave into the air the internet and pornography and images of what men should be doing sexually and so on. And I think it just leaves more men than we dream of feeling very, very unsure and flummoxed about what kind of a bloke am I, you know. And then, you know, they're trying, the other major thing that I always think about, and which I've learnt at Brent here, is how do I, as a bloke, separate from my mum and dad? How do I actually become some sort of person in my own right? What kind of a man can I be? And I can look to my dad, and I can look to my mum, and maybe my dad's a hotshot, and maybe I can't live up to him, or maybe my dad's a complete write-off. And what can I be anything better than that? And my mother, how do I deal with her care and her love if she's giving it to me? I've got to stand on my own 2 feet, that's what everybody says. I've got to stand up and be independent anyway. I want to be independent, I want to stand up, but how do I stand up, and what kind of person? All of these questions equals anxiety, you know. It's natural sort of things. I think it's tough these days because things change. I mean, you have to think of human beings in the context of the culture in which they live. We live in this westernized, modern day, highly technologically advanced sort of country, which had a major impact on employment. So, only 30, 40 years ago, a bloke would get up, he would grow up, and he'd be in a factory, or be in a coal mine, or he'd be doing something physical, steelworks or whatever, and he'd be the bee's knees. He could actually demonstrate he's a bloke and he's got strength and all the rest of it. Those opportunities are not around so much now, and they're much more diffuse. And employment isn't so easily obtainable, or if it is, it's not much to write home about, So, because I think a lot of us get a sense of affirmation about our value by the work that we do. I've been very lucky in my life, and I felt good about myself because people want to pay me to do what I do. And it's been interesting work, but I think a lot of young blokes can't see where they fit in, or they can just see drudgy jobs. I think when we're talking about young men, we're talking about, I've got a big thing about bodies, I think about their sexuality. They've got a lot of strength, they've got a lot of energy. Really, what can they do with it? What can they do with it? And there's not an easy answer to that question. People say sports, great, sports, but there aren't all that many facilities for sports. They have reduced considerably.
Yeah.
So sport is one way, some way in which they can actually exercise their bodies and let their testosterone sort of take its course.
Yeah.
How can I be a potent, able, strong, attractive man? It's not easy to get it. And what am I going to do? And I think those questions, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, in adolescence, in those teenage years, and through the 20s, it isn't an easy time these days. I mean, I can hear people saying, "Come on, what's new? I was a teenager, I grew up, I did it. Look at me, it hasn't done me any harm." I often people say, when they say that, I say, well, maybe look at yourself. Maybe you're not as great as you think you are. I think people bumble through, and they could have done it better. So I think there are a lot of preoccupations going on in young men's minds. I really do. Yeah. And so boys don't cry, that's what they say. Men don't cry. I've never been entirely convinced about that, actually. If you put a bit of space around somebody, men do cry. They do cry. Perhaps they can't show it. Maybe it is a sign of weakness in their subculture or whatever it is. But I think a lot of men feel like crying. Maybe they do it in private. As a psychotherapist working with young men over the years, they've all cried. All of them. And they've all got quite a lot to cry about. The role of manhood is being challenged in our contemporary society, and I don't think they quite know what they're supposed to do.
I was always quite aware that I was quite an anxious, young boy, but I never really did anything about it. But recently, not in Brent, but recently, I've been to. Up at the university, I've been and gone to talk to people about it and got advice on it, and it seems and it's funny because I don't know, I feel like when I was younger, especially, I kind of just ignored it, and then when we get older, the more you realise that it's a bit of an epidemic among young people, and everyone kind of has had issues with it and problems with it and stuff like that. But when I remember I was really close. I was speaking to a close friend of mine, really close. When I was about 17, 18, to going to the centre, because I know it's I remember the school I was at, so many kids from my school went there after school or in and around school just to go talk to people because they were either feeling really low or very anxious or just scared in general of because that's the thing with mental health is you don't, it's not a physical disease that you kind of know where the pain is, but sometimes you're just you don't know what's wrong with you. And I remember speaking to someone and being literally so close, had the number on my computer screen to ring them up and be I was just wondering how you go about getting involved in some of this and having some to talk to, but then I didn't in the end. But more recently I've been more inclined to go and talk to someone, and I have done at uni, which has been really good. I know loads of people that just really benefit from it because it was quite informal, it's quite relaxed atmosphere, good environment, not too intimidating.
Yeah.
Like a hospital ward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you think with anxiety? When did you start realizing that you were like being anxious, and how did you like differentiate that from just being stressed?
I don't know. Well, I think it was kind of. I think it was when I was around sort of like 17, 18 period, and I kind of like I had periods being stressed. It was just work, but then like anxiety was kind of something different because like whereas when I was stressed, I kind of distract myself with doing something else. Whereas like anxiety meant I like just couldn't do anything else but like dwell on the fact that I was feeling very anxious, and I'd like not talk to people or like I don't know, it's just so different. It was so like all consuming, and for the period that I was anxious, it could have been like 10 minutes, half an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, like half a day. And that it's just kind of like it's a lot of difference being just a little bit stressed, because that's kind of like
that's completely different.
Yeah.
And what are some of the ways do you think that helped you like not like dealing with anxiety, and like do you think there's other ways than just like talking to someone? Do you think there's like I know you do a lot of like theatre and like drama. Do you think that helps?
That helps a lot, like just getting involved in stuff. And I always noticed that I get worse like if like it would be worse the more like I didn't do stuff, and the more I kind of just like didn't keep myself busy or keep myself doing things that I loved doing and enjoyed doing. And like that's the thing, like theatre was like get involved in drama was like a really good outlet for that. And that's probably why I kind of because it was around I started like loving acting and stuff when I was like 16, and then when I was like 17, 18, when it started happening more, that's when I actually started doing a lot more drama and stuff. And I feel like that's probably like in a sense, because like I don't know, I know that's probably what helped me a lot. I know that sounds so like bullshit being like that was my therapy. It was my therapy. But I feel like that was, instead of like going and talking to like a professional or like telling like, I haven't really spoken to many people about it, but I know telling people about it or like going to a doctor, I just get involved in like that kind of stuff, and that was just kind of like a way of dealing with things. Just like doing something creative and like exactly.
Great.
Yeah.
And I guess so. Being at university now, I guess you've learned to sort of like deal with it through acting.
Yeah.
And do you think it's a big problem at university?
Yeah, I think it's worse. I think like genuinely a lot worse at university. Personally, since I've been there, like not my experience, just like in terms of like in general. Yeah. Like I think obviously like it's a different environment being at school, because at school you're going home a lot of the time, but whereas at university it's kind of like free reign, and like the culture of just like constantly going out, constantly drinking. And like lots of people like lots of drug taking obviously doesn't really help as well. But like so many people I've met like up in uni have problems and issues with it. But then again, like it's not as if I feel like it's very people talk about it, which is good. And it's you notice that like a lot of friends like have like severe issues, like severe problems. They'll go and ask for help, and then they'll see the waiting time is like ridiculous, and the only way they can do it is like doing this other thing that they just don't really feel comfortable doing with like lots of other people involved. And this is something that they've just come to terms with themselves. They're not really able to do it in a big group, and they just kind of want help. But then it's like, exactly. We're like they go to the doctor, and the doctor tell them, the health centre will be like, ring them up, 4 month waiting list. Ring them up, 6 month waiting list. Ring them up, 2 month waiting list. Or you could like tell your parents, which a lot of people don't want to do, and then pay £80 a session for a private doctor, which like there's a lot. Like one, it's a lot of money, and two, even if people have the money, they have to like probably talk to their parents, or like students aren't rich. Like they're either like on a loan, or they're getting money from parents, or like they have to work. I don't know. So it's like I think that sort of really adds to the situation. On top of the fact that university is a very like socially intense period of people's lives.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I guess like in terms of like being from Brent, what was it like growing up in Brent in general?
Yeah, I love growing up in Brent. I love my school. Like my school's primary school just down the road, and then a secondary school like literally just up the road. It kind of like I don't know. Yeah, talking to people, that was it just sounded like people just loved having, not love, but like really like excelled from having a place where you could go where it was a very relaxed atmosphere, very easy environment, very easy to get hold of, and something that was like on their back, like you said, something that was local to them, like, so they didn't have to like, you know, trek miles to see them. They didn't have to go to some special like hospital to see them. They didn't have to go, you know, they just went to someone who was able to talk to, who knew what they were doing, who could understand what they were going through, and they could also able to understand that like they were going to this place where so many other people their age or younger or a bit older were going. And it kind of like just felt, it sounded like for them, it just like felt like it made the whole ordeal a lot easier. And like a lot of it, it's just, I think it's just like, it sounded like it was just a case of like making the process a lot easier and a lot less intimidating and kind of stigmatized, you know, and like yeah,
definitely. And do you think like do you kind of know where this anxiety stems from?
Not really. No, I feel like I would sometimes, as in my like, not really. No, I don't know. Like I've always been aware of the fact that like, you know, like in my family and stuff, you know, and and like they've had problems with mental health, not like severe problems, but and like I've always been aware that I'm quite like an anxious person. I think it'll make it harder to kind of like sit down and work out like, where it stems from. I think that's kind of just a bit, doesn't really help that much. I feel like just a lot of my friends all the time, he gets like, you know, bad anxiety, he just says the best thing he's found is just like realising that he does get anxious and not trying to fight it and just accepting it.
Please be advised, this podcast contains potentially upsetting discussions about mental health and suicide. If you're a young person seeking mental health support, please see our end of episode guidance, contact your GP for support, or call the Papyrus helpline for immediate help on 0800 068 4141. Thanks.